Oh my goodness, look at this quilt. This is such a beauty. This is a double wedding ring quilt. This was sent to me by a viewer. She wants to remain anonymous. I can give you a few little details about this beauty. It was made in a Mennonite community in southern Iowa. I believe it was from the 1930s, 1940s. She gave me some dates, but I do see some fabrics in here that are from the 30s, and I think there's a few from the 40s. So that's where I'm dating it at, just with all the information that I have. It measures 67 by 67, which may seem small, but of course, like she mentioned, beds were smaller then too. It's incredible. The tiniest pieces. Oh my goodness, I love it. There is some damage that I'll talk to you about when we take a closer look. There's some stains, of course. You know, you're expecting that with age. It's an old quilt, but it's so soft. You just want to wrap yourself up in it. It's cozy and crinkly and wonderful. Completely, 100% done by hand. And I cannot wait to take a closer look at this one with you and see all the stuff I discovered in it and around it. And oh my goodness, it is so, so cool. So let's take a closer look now. All right, so it's hard to tell kind of the pieces of this as we take a closer look, but I do have an AccuQuilt die that's going to help us identify them, and you can see them here that makes this circle. So we have this piece that is kind of like, I think it's called an apple core. We have the orange peel, and then we have these units that are all in this, except for this is a lot bigger than these little pieces. To look at this and to understand its construction, we can see the apple core pieces here. And then we see these rings. And then where they come together, you see this square. Well, 4 squares that make a square that's kind of on point, but it's the ends of these units that make that up. Isn't that so cool? So there's a lot of work that goes into this. Not only the hand quilting, but all the little tiny pieces and the hand piecing. Oh my goodness, so pretty. So the dimensions are approximately 12 inches for these units. There are 72 of these center pieces. There are 161 of these arches, and there are 22 fabrics in these arches, giving a grand total of little scrappy tiny pieces of 3,542 pieces. Oh my goodness, can you believe that? It is so tiny and so intricate. I know I would lose the pieces, like I'd have them all over the place. It would be a mess. And I can't imagine keeping track of them all and having all those itty bitty pieces. So the little pieces measure 1 inch about this way and about a ½ inch this way. So they're itty bitty. Here's a picture of a penny next to it, just to get an idea of how small these pieces are, because I think it's really important that we identify that. It's a great way to honor the maker that they were so intricate with this. Now let's talk about the fabrics, because the fabrics are really cool too. The maker was really smart about this. Now, I say maker, it could have been more than one. The owner of this who sent it to me discussed that maybe it was a group of Mennonites that put this together. So just keep that in mind. I am going to just use the term maker, but it could be a whole group of people who did this. So maybe they didn't have as much of a hard time keeping track of all these tiny pieces as I would think. These center pieces, however, are all the same fabric. So let me move it down here so you can see it a little bit better. This and this is the same, and this is the same. It took some organization because there's units here and units here that are the same, and these are the same, and I can't even wrap my head around the math that was used. Another really cool feature about this, and let me get a good example, move it over, is that the ends of these are yellows. Now, they're not all the same yellow fabrics, but they are yellow. There are some that are faded, but you can even see that it was originally yellow. Can you imagine this quilt in its heyday? It must have been amazing, a showstopper for sure. There are also a lot of blues in here, so we see that yellow and blue mix. I love that too, but that seems like maybe the only rule, and that's what's really cool about these scrap quilts that I look at. I can learn so much from them because this is something I incorporate in my own practice when making scrap quilts. Have a rule of some sort because it allows for things to be cohesive, but allows also for the scrappiness to shine through. There's just so many cool fabrics. Some of them are worn, some of them are faded, but when you really look at them, they're just so, so cool. And the quilting has held this together so well. It's all done by hand, and it is wonderful. But before we talk about the quilting, let's talk about some of the damage. Along with the fading, we see on the edge over here, this corner, there's quite a bit of damage. Now, the owner of this did say it was in a cedar chest, but she doesn't know how it was stored prior to that. Maybe it was in a box and something got a hold of it, or maybe it was just a tear, or maybe it's just old age, but there is some damage. This is the only corner that really has a lot of damage. I can't necessarily repair this, but I can cut it down or maybe take this part off and salvage some of this quilt so we can make sure it has a long life ahead of it, at least in some capacity. Also, the binding, you can see, is quite damaged. It's worn away, but it was yellow. I love that it was yellow because it matches or coincides, I guess, with the yellow that's near the arches. Oh my goodness, I love it. And the fabric's so cute. You can just see the glimpse of it, and it just was perfect. It was perfect, and I can't imagine what it looked like when it was new because it's so beautiful even now. All right, let's go back to this quilting because the quilting motifs are neat. I took a lot of time really looking at these motifs because I wanted to see if it was just one maker or if it were multiples. Now, even though the stitches are very consistent and the design is consistent, it still could be multiple people, but it appears that all the quilting is very consistent, so that tells me that maybe it was just one maker. So we do see some quilting on the arches, very beautifully done. And in the center, we also see a flower, some little rosebuds, a few hearts that are kind of going over the arches. It's so pretty. Now let's talk about this apple core because at one end, let me find it. There's something special about them here. This end. Now it's only this last row here that this occurs, but it occurs in all of these across the row, which is so cool. You can see that there's a seam down the middle of these, and there's a seam on them all. But this one, or these two on this end, the two on the end are done with white thread. This one and, I don't know, 4, I guess, are done with blue thread, which is so interesting. But what's really cool is you can open it up and see those itty bitty hand stitches. The owner of this who sent it to me said it could have been a treadle machine, but I honestly think they're hand stitches. When I open them up very carefully and peek inside, it looks to me like it's a hand stitched piece. I love that. I love that they used what they had, that they seamed it right down the middle. It's just so cool. All right, let's talk about, let's see, the binding. Another thing I wanted to talk about the binding, and I know I'm all over the place here, is that it is scalloped. It's traditional how it follows the design. Very traditional with double wedding ring quilts even today. All right, let's flip her over. Okay, so the batting, I believe, of course, is cotton, especially given the age, and you can kind of see how the cotton has broken down. You can see the shadowing of the colors underneath coming through. We also see the seam in the middle that is completely done by hand for sure. There's some stains, but they're minor considering its age. This background, I believe, is the same fabric as the front. It's aged the same. It was probably a whiter color in its heyday, but it's of course not now. It's so cool. There are so many lessons to learn from this beauty. Oh my goodness, I love it. And on my blog, I have a bunch more and I have some more information about it that I didn't include in this video just because there's a lot to say about this quilt. So check that out. I'll put a link in the first comment too so you can see that. So I've identified 3 lessons, but I'd love to hear what you could learn from this because there's so many you could learn so much from this. The first thing though I think is so cool is the controlled scrappiness, just because it's something I've really incorporated into my own scrap quilting life. And I love that the fabrics were the same. Of course, fabrics were limited then. It could have been clothing, it could have been dresses. I doubt it was yardage, it probably was cotton clothing, but feed sacks, there's all kinds of stuff in here. It is all cotton, but it is nice to see that consistency, that they had enough for every single one of those end units. Love that. And then the yellow, they're different fabrics, but they're the same shade. And I love that too, because it does give that cohesive feel to the whole thing. The next lesson I learned from this is to try a design like this. So I am going to make a double wedding ring quilt. I have always wanted to, and I do have the die. I'll probably use the die, so it's a little bit of cheating, but it's such a cool design and such a traditional design, definitely on my quilting bucket list. And I hope it inspires you to try something like this too. The next thing that we can learn is that yellow binding tying in to that yellow scrappiness. Again, giving that consistent feeling. And then also trying to do a binding like this is really cool. You'd almost have to have a bias binding to do something like this to ease it around the curves, but it's doable. We can do it. You can do it. I can do it. And we need to try it, right? What's it gonna hurt to try it? Worst case scenario, you cut it off even, you do a traditional binding. If it doesn't work out, but it could work out, and that would be so cool too. And finally, piecing those apple core pieces. I just think it's so interesting that they use blue thread instead of a white thread. I'm not sure why they did that, but it does give me permission to kind of use what I have and maybe not necessarily get so hung up on the little things like that. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lessons from an Old Quilt. I think we're at almost like 80 quilts that I've done, so make sure you check out the playlist if you want to see more. I've grown over the last 4 years of doing this. I'm definitely less critical than I used to be of these quilts, and it is interesting to go back and see that arch of how I changed through this process. It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of quilts. I have a lot of quilts to share too. I probably have another 50 that I haven't even explored yet with you, and I can't wait. And I love that this person sent this to me. She also sent me another quilt. Show you a picture of it right here. And I'm so grateful for anybody who does that, but never feel you have to, of course. But it's such a nice gesture for people to think of me and know I'm going to take really good care of these quilts, because I am. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you take some time to sew. I'll see you real soon. Bye.